Welcome to Wake Up Excited. In this episode, I talk with Cameron Moll. Cameron is a veteran web designer, leader, consultant, maker, family man, and is one heck of a nice guy. I've been learning from Cameron for as long as I've been working on the web, so I was thrilled to be able to have such a wide-ranging conversation with him. We cover a lot of ground, talking about longevity and age in a fast-moving industry, different management, design, and teaching styles, the power of authenticity in building trust in creative teams, the importance of diversity in all dimensions, how Cameron's faith informs his values and operating system, why attitude matters so much, cultivating hobbies for the hell of it, and the never-ending task of finding balance in a world full of obligations. Before we begin, I want to remind you that Wake Up Excited is entirely self-funded, kind of acting as my own advertiser here. So if you'd like to support the show and the rest of my work and my family, I'd love it if you checked out our online courses. We just launched pre-orders for a brand new course called AI and Design Systems that teaches your team how to create great digital products by combining the generative power of AI with the thoughtful constraints and guardrails of a design system. So you could check that out at aianddesign.systems. And you could check out our other courses about digital design and development at bradfrost.com/courses. All right, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Cameron Moll. Welcome to the Wake Up Excited podcast. I'm super excited to have Cameron Moll here right off the bat. What has you waking up excited?
Oh, gosh. So maybe I should start here. Probably not the right place to start, but I have a love-hate relationship with my career, with design, with tech, and everything else like that. And so there's some things that just frustrate me to no end. You know, I think I'm preaching to the choir to some degree, to you and maybe other people listening to this, that it can be a tough industry. And yet I still wake up super excited that I get to design. I mean, seriously, I get to design stuff that people use. They interact with it. It might change their lives. It might make their day a little bit better, whatever it is. I mean, the fact that we get to do that day in and day out, I think 25 years into it, I wouldn't have expected myself to still be excited about designing, but I'm just as excited as I've ever been.
That's beautiful. And that longevity matters, especially in a medium that is not all that old.
Yeah, I mean, really, what we've been doing is almost like the genesis of when you and I both started. Tech and design pieces, components coming together. It's still a relatively nascent industry. And so in the early days, we were just making it up. And I think that kind of making it up has never gone away. We're in an era now where we're kind of making things up with AI, right, in a different way. And so I think some of that making upness is what keeps me on my toes, which keeps us, I think, engaged in this industry. But I think also leads to the hate side for me of like, oh, it feels like I'm always chasing what's next around the corner. And can I really stay on top of my game, especially when I have people literally now half my age coming up that are fantastic designers, right? And they know how to do AI prompting really well or something like that. And so, you know, trying to stay up with that pace can sometimes be literally exhausting, but I think I'm still holding my own so far, but we'll see how long that lasts.
Do you feel that, like, you feel that kind of replacement pressure? Like, do you feel that way?
You know, I've felt that way for a long time now. I think it was most evident when I joined Facebook Meta back in 2016, and so many of my peers were so much younger than myself. You know, I had 5 kids at the time coming into that role, and most of my peers were either not married, or if they were, they didn't have kids yet. And so it did feel like everyone around me was kind of running circles around me because they were younger and whatever else that might equate to. It's this weird, unnecessary pressure maybe that I've placed on myself that there's somebody who's going to replace me if I don't keep my game up. And so therefore I always have to be a better designer, a better leader, you know, staying on top of trends and all of those things. And it's an unrealistic expectation. It really is self-imposed. Yes, there might be someone who would replace me at some point, but this is now, you know, I joined Facebook, in 2016. So this is 9 years ago. Nobody's killed me off. and nobody's probably going to kill me off
It's
for
still
another
here.
9 years, right? So this is really
Right.
something to not be worrying about. But I think it's just the environment that surrounds us, that this environment, this industry welcomes people to start at a very young age. And so I think
Yeah.
that will always be the case, right? The tinkerers, the explorers, whatever, age
Mhm.
16, 14, you name it, there's always going to be people around us that bring in this vibrant energy that at our ages now, we literally don't have the same energy we had 25 years ago, 30 years ago. But
Yeah.
needless to say, we have the other things they don't, the wisdom, the experience. I mean, you just go on, name the number of things that we bring to the table and need to remind ourselves of, that we still have so much to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's in the combination of those things that great things can happen. Because if you put a bunch of inexperienced people together and say, go and point them at something, they're going to make a freaking mess. Right.
Right.
But at the same time, so that tension is kind of welcome, because you get people who have been through the ringer enough times to know, here's these weird left turns, or here's these really dangerous areas to avoid, and here's the real arm, or here's where that path will take you, and to
Yep.
have that vantage point is really helpful. What have you found to be helpful to kind of take that pressure off of yourself? Obviously, like, it doesn't ever fully go away. Again, you're always like, am I still relevant, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. Number one, so over the last few years, I've been on this journey to figure out, what, as a design leader, does my role really need to be at this stage of my career, as I
Mm.
lead teams, as I write, and those sorts of things. But I'm in this tussle right now of how much I should be managing design and how much I should be actually doing design, and kind of
Mhm.
leading through design. One of my peers at Meta would often say, because he was not doing any design, nor was I doing design as head of design for the Facebook events platform. And I mean, I can literally count on two hands the number of times that in 3 years I ever opened up Sketch, it was Sketch back then, or Figma, to design stuff. It was that infrequent. And
Mhm.
so my peer would often say, I design through people, that he's kind of designing through his teams. And that's, I think, what a lot of the industry became over the last 8, 10 years, where we have a lot of middle level and upper level managers that are mostly managing people, and they're kind of managing design through other people. I think we're
Mhm.
seeing some of that come back to the earlier days of our industry, where now we have leaders that are more hands-on, and that's been my kind of shift over the last couple of years in particular, where I'm now starting to do more design than I've done, getting back to maybe a creative director role, for lack of a better term. That's
Yeah.
a terrible
Yep.
title to use, but it's along those lines. And so for me, it's kind of balancing the act of managing design and managing design through people
Mhm.
with showing people what great design looks like. And so I've had to, I'm very much now in Figma these days. I'm very much in just the nuts and bolts and the trenches of design, and I really enjoy that. But I also have to balance that with still managing and leading design. So I don't know that I could tell you right now if I've figured it out, right? The balance between managing design through other people and doing design and showing what great design looks like. But I think there's that. It's a good tussle to be having for myself, and perhaps for others to have that tussle of, what is that right balance. And for me, at this stage of my career, it is not what my 5 previous years were at Facebook and then later at Pendo, where I was really not doing any design. I think where I'm at now, where I'm doing some design and some management / leadership, is where I need to be operating right now. And so I find a lot of value, getting back to your question, in being able to combat those feelings of, oh, I can't design because these people are younger and faster and all of those things. Well, no, I actually still can, I think, design relatively well. And so I feel like I'm still in the game, so to speak, by doing that. I'm remembering number two, but before I go to number two, I'm going to pause there if you have anything that you want to jump in and say.
I've always known you to be this multi-dimensional person. And I want to get into all of those dimensions, but it's like the conundrum of, oh, should I do this or this? when you realize you sort of free yourself from that either or, it can be a both
Yep.
and, in that there's this multidimensionality to it, that you could lead by demonstration, you could lead by modeling, you could lead by just doing the thing and sort of saying, it's like this. Whenever I consult with companies, we get in there and our whole ethos is around teaching a team how to fish. We always talk about this idea of like a crossfade, where it's just, I'm going to do this the first round. The next round, we're going to do it kind of in equal parts. And then the last round, you're going to do it. And I'm going to be just more, backseat, hovering art director style, nudging and guiding, but you're going to be taking on the bulk of it. So it's the action, the teaching, the demonstration, it's the words, it's the act, it's all of that stuff kind of hanging together that yields good results, versus it's this or it's that. And there used to be, like, one last thing I'll say is, like, I come from the agency world, and that was a big conundrum for designers. There's like a specific design path and a career ladder. And eventually you end up where you ended up, which is, oh yeah, you're such a good designer that you no longer design. It sounds ridiculous. And what RGA was the agency that I was at, and they kind of created this, like, almost kind of like super designer role, because a bunch of people were like, I'm really good, I've kind of hit the ceiling, but I have no interest in managing other people. That's not what I'm interested in. I don't think I'm particularly good at it. It's not going to fill my cup, which is a totally valid path. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing and just kind of want to get compensated, I guess, or sort of the status that comes with that, or whatever. So as I've sort of like turned towards like teaching, which is effectively what your design leadership is. It's like you are a teacher, and there's a lot of different modalities to teaching, and teaching by way of doing and demonstration are like really potent and powerful tools.
I mean, you're making some really important points here. We've matured as an industry for the most part, where it used to be, like you were saying, that if you wanted to progress in your career, you had to go into management and stop designing, right? So we take these fantastic designers and turn them into people and process managers, and they would not design anymore. And now we have, a lot of companies have a management track or promotion, and then an IC, typically called an IC, individual contributor track, where you can get up to like principal level, staff level, and things like that. And we're seeing more of those titles. Just over the last week, I've seen principal titles on LinkedIn more than maybe I have recently. And so I think we've really matured. What I don't think we've figured out is what you touched on earlier, and that is, for the management track, it's often a belief that once you go into that track, it's like your design days are over, right? And you can no longer manage and do design, right? You're done.
Right.
You're going up that track. And it doesn't need to be a binary decision. In some cases, it does be. Certainly when you get into higher levels, you're probably doing a lot of people and process management. But I'm starting to disagree more with the notion that, even at a chief level design role, you should be doing zero design. I'm starting to question if that's actually the reality of where we should be going as an industry, or if there still needs to be some element of a very senior level manager, director, whatever, who is still doing some design. And we could talk forever about what doing some design means, right? That could be clock, that could be outside of work, that could be sitting in design critiques, right? And that's your form of designing. But what I'm trying to get at is I just don't think we need to let go of the act of designing maybe as much as we've believed we've needed to over the last 5 to 7 years. And I keep using that, time frame of 5 to 7, 8 to 10, whatever, because that's been my experience of going to, like, let's call it the Silicon Valley type mindset of, we have manager track, the IC track, and never the twain shall meet in some respects. And I think it's a good time to be asking the question, is that the right way to go for our industry? Now, let me segue into something you mentioned as well, and that is point number 2. One of the things I really enjoy now and get excited about, and that helps me maybe temper the feeling that I'm getting replaced by younger people, is I love being able to teach and educate and mentor. And you can certainly do that through designing, like we're talking about now, but you can also do that through writing and speaking and all these other things, right? You and I have been doing this for a very long time. 2005, South by Southwest was the very first time I spoke at a conference. And for me back then, I was 6 years into my career and I probably should not have been on stage. I'm like, who am I to actually know what I'm talking about? But here I am. And so back then it was like pretending that I know everything.
Sure.
Now it's like, I don't know everything now, but I sure know a lot more now. And so now I feel very confident in my ability to educate and mentor and kind of lift up the next generation of designers. And so that makes me really excited, whether or not I'm frightened by the fact that they're half my age and they can design better than I am. I've got all these other things that they don't have yet that I can help them get to a much better spot in their careers.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think that there's a real potent and powerful thing that happens when you make that connection through sharing what you've learned, but also you do a great job at sort of sharing the hard stuff. And here is that struggle. What you're able to do, especially whenever, you've been at this for a long time, to just even say the things you're saying now, that in itself is a gift to a lot of people, because a lot of people are that 6 years or less in their careers. And they're like, I shouldn't be on stage or whatever, or who am I to say this? Or whenever there's all these other people that are doing it. And I think that it's that willingness to share and be vulnerable and to demonstrate that and to say, hey, here are these feelings and here are these things and here are these things that I'm wrestling with. And guess what? Nobody has it figured out. You're not alone in that. There's something really, really important there, because it deflates so much of that just really toxic mentality, that competitiveness that I feel like gets in the way of really good stuff from happening. Like, there's a real power to that. Just like, hey, I don't know how this works. It's like, holy shit, he actually said it. He actually said it. Like, yeah, I don't get how it works either. All right, let's figure it out. There's something cool in there. Nobody has this figured out. And anybody that pretends they do, I will sit back and say, sure you do. No, tell me how this is all going to go down.
I'm so glad we're talking about this. And here's why. Authenticity has been so important to me as a leader and in everything that I do. I don't know that this is why I love that we're talking about this. I'm not sure that I've ever written or talked about this. It's not secretive, but back in the earliest days, I called my website, my blog, Authentic Boredom. I founded a job board called Authentic Jobs. My Flickr username was Authentic. I mean, all of these things. And I don't think I was trying to be pretentious, but it was kind of underscoring that I care a great deal about authenticity. So to your point, it matters a great deal to me that I let people know that I don't have everything figured out and that I'm learning from something and that I made a mistake here or things like that. I appreciate seeing this in the people that lead and direct me, and I know that people that I've led and the teams that I've worked with certainly appreciate seeing that Cameron doesn't have everything figured out. The reason why I think I really enjoy this is because much of the leadership world, and especially in tech, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to look like you have things figured out. You're supposed to always be confident. And I'm kind of intentionally not that person sometimes because A, that's just fundamentally not who I am. And B, I want people to see that there is another way to lead and to manage, and that is to let people know that you don't have it figured out.
And in fact, at some point when somebody does pretend to know all the answers, back to that authenticity, it's like, there is no way that you authentically know everything that's going on. Not to totally wade into politics, but when you talk about something that's so huge and multifaceted, to show up with certitude around all of it, and here's exactly what we're going to do. It's like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Give me an absolute break. There's kind of an interesting dynamic there because there's a difference between confidence, which is a good quality, right? And authenticity, which is a good quality, and truth. And there's a lot of stuff like wrapped up in that. But it's like, how do you sort of balance that sweet spot between like, I've got good stuff, I've got good vision, I've got good direction, I've got good ideas, but also the humility enough and and to be authentic with that humility to know when you're out of your depths, or it's like, yeah, I know a little bit about this, but like I would welcome learning more, or like these other people seem to know what's up. So let's go listen to them and take what they have to say seriously. It's that arrogance that seems to just permeate and seems to be what certainly coming back to a certain area of our field, it almost is promoting that kind of arrogance. And that's hard, especially whenever it's like, you got a bunch of people competing for the same jobs. Like the last thing you want to do is go, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I mean, there is a reality that you do set yourself up for some bad situations, not great results when you go down the path of saying, I don't know, or I need time to figure this out, and there can be that void, that vacuum that you create that will be filled by someone else, and that someone else may now start to take on the very things that you wanted to take on, right? So there is an inherent risk in doing that. But for me, I'm not going to try to pretend to be someone I'm not. And I want people around me to know that we are part of solving a problem together, that I don't have everything figured out. I've got a good idea and I've got a good understanding of the process we're going to use to get there, but this is a team sport, right? And so if I make it apparent that I kind of know where we're going, guys, but I need your help in this, people start to get bought into that. Some people are not like that. I mean, I managed and worked with enough people that some people don't like being led by the I don't know authentic profile types. They want the uber confident, super confident. They want that type of leader, and they're turned off. I've seen this happen personally before. They're turned off by that style of leader, the Cameron style of leader, let's call it. But at the end of the day, I can't be the leader for everyone, right? I got to be the leader that I'm most effective at. And if that's not going to work for some people, I have to be okay with that.
Yeah. And at some point though, it does become a reflection of, the individual kind of ethos and what their operating system is. As you're saying it, I like the thought that came to mind is like, I wish that I had more time to watch basketball, but like growing up and being in like in the 90s and stuff, you would watch a lot of basketball. And so you'd see college basketball and it's just, they'd work the ball around the whole perimeter and pass the ball like 8 times before somebody goes up for a shot. And then in stark contrast was the professionals who, is just totally a game of one-on-one. They'd, only dish it off if they are triple teamed and they couldn't take it any further. And even then, they still probably try to go up for a shot. And I remember that contrast being so stark, where it's like, here you have this like well-oiled team machinery and this real collaborative understanding versus this, like, I'm a freaking superstar and I guess you'll be around if I need you. I don't know. That's what came to my mind. And I think that Silicon Valley ethos is that rock star developer or designer or whatever, or that the people have just been fed a lot of stuff. And at the end of the day, the reality remains what you said earlier. This is a team sport. Is a team sport. Irrespective if you want to admit that or not, that's on you.
Yeah.
But the reality is, unless you are building that database from the ground up, doing the CI/CD pipeline in addition to your brand guidelines, in addition to get over yourself, like you rely on other people rely on you. That is a reality.
100%. 100%. And I think it goes without saying to our peers that are listening in those Silicon Valley areas or companies that there's plenty of good work that's being done. I think sometimes we over dramatize what might happen in, the big pockets of our industry, but it can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're
Oh
in
yeah.
Florida myself or anywhere else. It can happen in all of those places. But for me, I think I've tried to carry that. We lived in Utah for 10 years. That's where my career started. And then we moved to Florida. Then we moved to back to California and back to Florida. And so I've tried to carry with me, anywhere I've gone, I've tried to carry, Cameron's management style as best as I could, even though to some degree we all have to conform to whatever our current employer is. And we kind of let some things go dormant in the ways that we manage and design and so forth. And that's totally fine in an effort to be able to play the game in a good way. But at the end of the day, we've got to keep parts of us that are uniquely us. And for me, it's just been making sure I don't always come off like I've got everything figured out.
Yeah, I think that that's amazing. And back to that authenticity, I think that that matters. And just as you're sort of reminding me of your different geographical changes, there's the old phrase, like, no matter where you go, there you are. Right.
Yep.
And I don't know if you feel this way, but I think that a lot of people tend to be a part of their environment and end up sort of getting carried away by it or swept away by it. And there's something that's really interesting. And as someone who has authentic all over their like formal handles, like that idea of kind of having a good sense of self and having a good value system and having a good introspective look and understanding of what you're doing and how you're applying yourself, having that in place as you change geographies, as you change jobs, as you change like different things. Do you speak to that? Like how you feel about that kind of sense of self or that foundation and how that interacts with wherever you happen to find yourself?
Yeah, I think I've been a square peg in a round hole for my entire career. And on the one hand, I appreciate the insights that I've been able to acquire because of that. And on the other hand, I'm appreciative of my peers that have been maybe understanding of being a square peg in that round hole for, again, my entire career. If I can go way back, the timing was such that we found out so I got married when I was 22. We had our first kid at 24 when I was 24. And I remember the timing of finding out we were pregnant with the first one and getting offered my first full-time role in web design happened almost within 2 weeks of each other, something like that.
Oh my God.
So I've not known anything other than having like kids literally my entire career. My oldest is now 24. We have 5 sons. They're all sons. 2 of them are now married. And so it's just like, wow, it's just like what happened over these last 2.5 decades. So the family part of it, I think, has kept me grounded in every aspect. It's kept me grounded in terms of like, I need to shut off and go home because I've got, responsibilities at home. It's kept me grounded in terms of what really matters to me. Do I care that much about design that I'm going to, exhaust all my available weekends doing design work? Or are there other things that matter just as much or perhaps matter even more? And of course, my family matters more than those things. And so for me, work has been a vehicle to provide for my family and to be able to provide a wonderful upbringing for 5 outstanding sons. And so that's always had to be a part of how I've operated. And I know that has informed how I've managed. And when I have someone now that I'm literally managing people that are the same age as my kids, I get it, right? I understand what that kid perhaps has been through in their life up to this point. I understand their aspirations. I understand just a bunch of things that a lot of managers maybe don't understand, that human component. They understand the processes and the design systems and all those things, but maybe they don't get the mental health side of things. Like you got a human being sitting across the table from you that might be suffering severely from depression, and you're having to figure out how to work with them as their manager. And they're not going to like put it all on the table. You're not their therapist, but you do need to understand that that's part of the calculus of managing this person. They might not be able to show up at work, tomorrow because they just are in a really bad funk. And it's going to take a day or two to get out of that. How do you deal with that as a manager? So I think that's really helped me to be a different person throughout my career than I would have been otherwise without having a family as a big part of that.
You experienced having 5 children, going through this immensely challenging period of COVID, and it should be talked about more. It's like, man, that messed us up. That messed us all up. But you talk about a bunch of young minds. My youngest cousin, who's quite a bit younger, she missed her senior year of high school and her first year of university do this. And it's like, man, you want to talk about some of the most important full times, like you're establishing your sense of self. These young professionals that you're now encountering, like they all went through that, and you got a front row seat for that with your own kids, right? Yeah. So it's like that ability for you to empathize with what they're going through is huge, that you wouldn't get if you were maybe like 30 years old and you haven't figured out, but you haven't had those kids of your own yet or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah. Our second oldest, in fact, went through that exact experience that you just described there. We had his graduation out back. Yeah. We had his graduation out back in our yard and a bunch of other things. And it was, man, that was a tough period for them. Something else I think is worth mentioning is that I've tried to not position myself as being more qualified as a manager than my peers just because I have children. There's no reason for me to like wield this sword of I have kids and you don't, and so therefore I'm a more experienced manager. I've tried my best to never take that approach, because I think any manager has a fair shot at being a great manager, whether or not they have kids. Some of course we all I think have friends and family members who are physically unable to have kids, right? And there's that component as well. And so I never want people around me to feel like they're less than I am because they don't have kids. It's just to say that I might be able to bring something to the table that other managers can't bring to the table, and I shouldn't be ashamed of that. I should try to leverage that.
We come to work into life with our own privileges and our own burdens and our own unique experiences. Like it is a given that there is no carbon copy of you around, right? And I think that that's one of the things that upsets me so much whenever things like diversity get sort of weaponized, and in this moment in time it's this really, hot button issue. It's like what we're talking about is a bunch of people that have a bunch of perspectives, a bunch of experience, and the ability to come together and bring a diversity of different life experiences, make things better. Like without a doubt. Oh, have you considered this? Oh, no, I didn't. Because I didn't go through that, or I don't experience that, right? In the same way that, kids, no kids, right? You lived in Utah. I've never lived in Utah, right? Like and that's what gets so gross about like this kind of weaponization and this watering down of diversity. It's like when you experience a diversity of experience and a diversity of people, you come to appreciate, or at least this has been the case for me, and I'm really fortunate to have this perspective, is that you're like, oh, okay, this is different. This isn't better or worse. You have kids. You bring with it all the great lessons learned from that and the perspective from that. This other person has had this really weird adventure. They lived a nomadic life for 3 years, and that gives them their own perspective.
Yeah.
And it's in the coming together of all of those different things is where really beautiful things can happen. And that's why I love back to sort of like the excitement of like still getting to design and do things. That's the fun, is you get to show up with those other people who are bringing with it their own tools, their own experience to the table. And you get to point that in a direction together. And like, how freaking cool is that? Like, that's it. That's it right there. Like as a musician, oh, you know how to play? okay, we're going to play. I don't know what their background is. I don't know what genres they're adept in or not, but we're going to figure it out, right? Like we're going to have some fun playing together and we'll make something uniquely ours because like no two people have had the exact same experience
Yeah.
or background as us. And it seems so obvious to me, but at the same time, like it seems like there's whether it's said explicitly or it's just implicitly there, it's false binary of there's a right way of doing things and there's a wrong way of doing things. That frustrates me to know.
Yep. You've touched on my music nerve for a second, so I'm going to draw an example from there. I really love the music of Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and their Kind of Blue album, one of the best albums I think of all time, and that's a great example of like two very different musicians that come together to produce something remarkable and beautiful. I mean, Miles Davis is like, he's very articulate about like the notes he plays, right? They're selective, they're here, they're just a dash here, and then maybe he waits for a couple of seconds and then throws in a couple more notes. And John Coltrane is like, he's all over the map, right? It's like,
yeah,
how are those two guys going to work together? And I think that, to your point, I think that's how we operate best sometimes. I've long said that some of the worst teams are where you have A players, they're all A players on the team, so to speak, and you don't have any, diversity, not only racially and everything else, but you just don't have diversity of like talent or of experience and so on and so forth. And so you want to bring together those different voices and the backgrounds that they have kids and don't have kids. And that's, I think, when we produce fantastic teams that are really capable of producing phenomenal experiences. It's not that we need those things to produce great user experiences, right? There's to some degree we could do that without, talking extensively like we have been about, Cameron has kids and you don't, and blah, blah, blah. You could still produce great work, but I think it's just the nature of those teams working together that magical things happen when you allow that diversity. And I like to think of it as like full spectrum diversity, age and race and
everything, literally everything.
Yep. Put that in this like pot and you allow just these wonderful things to happen. I don't know. I kind of go back to the fact that I'm a little shocked and very appreciative that some people have been so welcoming of me over the years, because I do feel like this square peg. I'm a very religious person to add to having kids and everything else, right? And so I've been very careful to not let my beliefs bleed into the work that we do. But inevitably, when I show up for work, there's like the religious part of Cameron that's coming to work. And while you might not see that on the surface, that's informing the way that I manage. That's informing the way that even I design. And so the fact that we can allow people, not only allow, but embrace them to come to work with those things, whether or not they're visible on the surface, I think is that's our right. That's our privilege. That's what we need to be doing.
Yeah, no, that's really beautifully said. And I'm glad you brought up your faith. You're there, you sort of have this like sense of self and you're showing up. My observation of you is that, yes, you've been contemplating these things and there's a real intentionality to it. Undoubtedly, your faith has a big role in that sort of reflection of like, well, who am I and how am I operating in the world? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Two things are coming to mind. So first, I think for me, I understand the long game, the way that, I have not only come to understand it by the teachings of the beliefs that I have, but who I've become as I've acted on those beliefs and as I've learned and had wonderful experiences being a very religious person. And so an example here is the fact that I very firmly believe that there is a life after this one. And so therefore, the things I'm doing now will matter in the longer term. And so how does that, relate to what I'm doing as a manager, as a person, and the things I allow myself to do or not to do, knowing that I'm going to be held accountable. My belief is that I'm going to be held accountable at some point for these actions. And so I can't just write off, doing something stupid and whether or not it hurts anyone, it doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. I just know that that's going to be part of the calculus for me at some point. And so that I think helps inform maybe the decisions that I make. And two, related to that, I can't say I've always been the person at work that I want to be or should be, but I've tried to be someone at work that is not only faithful to the responsibilities of the role and the employer that I'm working with, or whether or not it's my own company, but it's also faithful to the things that I believe and the beliefs I have about treating other people as my neighbor and treating them with
Yes.
respect and love
Yes.
and dignity and all of those things. And we don't talk about like loving others in the workplace, but there is inherently a part of naturally what I try to do that includes a component of loving people in a neighborly
Yeah.
way that I work with. And I just, I have to find ways for that to be part of how I operate.
Those have to be congruent. You couldn't be showing up to develop some weapons.
Here's the thing though. I mean, there have been times where that people have done some wrong things, and maybe I've done wrong things too. And you start getting into like legal action and all of that. And so it's like, how do I like show neighborly love to someone like that? So there's the reality of we have to still be firm in a secular sense, in a sense that we're doing work, we're contractually obligated. Some things go really wrong sometimes and south, and you have to take a firm stance, and it doesn't feel right. It just feels icky and all of those things, but it is
No.
part of life. But at the end of the day, I still know that there's a long term for me. And I try to, I've got to try to navigate that terrible situation in such a way that I'll be okay with it, proud of it when it's all said and done.
I think that's really great. It's like that kind of moral compass, and it sounds like you really, lean on your faith to help guide those difficult decisions where you could take it a number of ways, right? But it's there's almost like heard you saying, it's like whenever fast forward 5 years down the road, or in the cosmic sense, right, at the end of life, how will I look back on that, and how will, God or anyone judge me on how I acted in that moment? And that perspective, right, that ability to kind of open it up, whether it's God or just your future self, like looking back and reflecting on your legacy or whatever it is. If you want to just kind of, you look back and you're like, am I happy with what I'm recalling, right? Like, am I proud of how I acted in that situation? Are there things I could have been doing better? That ability to step outside of yourself in that present moment is a really powerful tool to make sure that you're acting in accordance with your true self and how you want to be as a person.
What you're making me think of is, okay, so Cameron's a square peg in a round hole and all of those things, but there is a business value in trying to show up to work in a way that other people want to work with you, in a way that allows you to see the good in other people. And, the people that are maybe listening to this episode, I'll say to you what I'm going to say to some students, some UX students very soon as I speak to them again. Man, relationships in our industry are just invaluable. I mean, you and I have known each other for a very long time, right? And that started many, many moons ago. And we've now had countless interactions that our paths have weaved in and out over the years. And that's because we initially established, this relationship that has now blossomed into a phenomenal relationship. And so there is business value in finding ways to work well with other people.
Yep.
That will pay dividends for many, many years to come. And we both seen that. Whether or not you are, someone of faith like myself, maybe the takeaway is if you invest in treating other people nice, that's going to pay off in tremendous ways over the course of your career.
It seems like a no-brainer on a lot of levels, which is why kind of coming back to that, like kind of rock star, go it alone attitude, it might work out for you or in the short term, but like in the long run, it's like you're burning bridges, you're doing all this stuff that, you'll find yourself without a leg to stand on. Like you said, like there's a business value, but also, my God, it is just the human thing to do. And one of my favorite things as a consultant, ducking my head into these organizations that are various flavors of, I don't want to say dysfunctional, but just as we've kind of reminded each other of, I think in this conversation, is one of the things that I love to do whenever I'm working with teams. It's like, man, isn't this cool? We all get to do this together. Like, isn't this fun? Like, I will say it out loud, and it's like, it'll get a chuckle. Yeah, it's kind of meant for a laugh, but it's also I'm being dead serious here. Like this is so cool. And we get to do this together. And how cool is that like we get to like have meetings where we're figuring out like what color of blue like this should be. Like there's a billion things we could be doing that's worse than this. And so cultivating that, like, why wouldn't you want to just show up and do work with people that you enjoy being around? Why wouldn't you want to cultivate those relationships? Why wouldn't you? Like, what are you trying to get out of being competitive or of being cutthroat or I don't, I fundamentally don't get it. But some people I've learned there's people they that like to argue and like that's kind of like they pass the time, I guess. Like they seem to get like a real enjoyment out of it. I don't understand it. I can't do that. But it's like there's some people that just like to do that. Like they're kind of wired a certain way. I don't know.
I don't know either. I think there's definitely sometimes individuals that bring maybe a contentious approach to a discussion. There are others that they're just driven by excellence, and so their form of trying to get to the right outcome is to push firmly and to push others, to be greater and to work harder and all of those things. I think there is some jockeying that happens, maybe a big amount of that happening in some pockets, where if your company does performance reviews every 6 months or whatever period of time, right, you're going up against your peers for promotions, for raises, whatever it might be. And so, you're going to have to kind of like show up and be the strongest voice in the room and to be the person that came up with this brilliant solution. And so there's definitely that dynamic that we've both seen over the course of our careers. But I don't know. We've got to find a way to balance that to where it's not all about the jockeying. It's not all about like producing the best experience mankind has ever known. It's like, no. Let's enjoy this along this. Let's have some fun doing it along the way.
Yeah. Hard agree. And I think that there's like a broader reframing where it's just like, there's a scarcity of resources. There's a scarcity of promotions. There's only so much money to go around or whatever. You could absolutely see and understand and appreciate that creates a culture of competition that is born of that reality, right? That sets up that psychological game of like, well, like how much do I really want to give? There's a lot of calculus there. But at the end of the day, probably not a surprise, or I would be surprised if you disagreed with me, but it's like that more collaborative approach yields better results, like 100% of the time, right? So when you talk about that like scarcity of money or whatever that might be, we'll stick with money. Like, well, if you as a team yielded, much better results and therefore made more money, then it's like, well, guess what? You get to diffuse that dynamic, right? Because, all of a sudden now there's more money to go around and, we all participated in this thing and we're getting rewarded for it. Like it's absolutely possible, but it feels like it needs to be a conscious decision, and it's not the norm. I don't think that that's the norm. It's absolutely possible. It just isn't. It's not the norm.
Yeah, and one of the reasons this is so vitally important to ongoing production of great output is because any team can work together where everybody's a jerk, they hate each other, and yet they ship a phenomenal product at the end of the day. But guess what? That team is not going to want to work together again a second time, much less a third and fourth time. And so you're looking at the longer term of this machine, this team, this company producing great output consistently and regularly. And to do that, you can't have people always jockeying for position. You can't have people showing up as jerks in meetings. You got to find a way such that the work is pleasurable at the same time it's producing high output, high quality.
And that all feeds into burnout and mental health and taking good care of the people that you rely on. And that's why it's such a tragedy. It's more predominant in certain pockets, but other places not, where it's just like, you need to grind all the time. If you're not working 12 hours a day, then like, what are you doing?
Yep.
Like you said, yeah, that might get that project done. That person's going to be a husk, and you can't sustain that. And do you really want to have to go through that and put people through that? You really want to encourage that? It's such a counterproductive belief that is seemingly very strongly held. And it's very prevalent. It is very prevalent. And all you need to do is go through it a couple times yourself to go, I do not want that. And if you're like anyone who's like listening, that's experienced that or going through it now, or they're like feeling like they're getting close, like, I don't know, what advice do you have for those people?
Well, Brad, this is really starting to come back to why I think a manager who's seen different situations in life can really be of value, especially to those younger employees, for a couple of reasons. One, good managers that are experienced in understanding burnout, depression, and so forth, they can anticipate before you do that you're starting to approach that kind of burned out stage. I can't tell you the number of times I've told my team members to take time off. I'm like, I can sense it. You probably are not seeing it, but I can tell you need some time off. So let's have a conversation about that. And a good manager can find tactful ways to approach that conversation. A good manager can also find ways that, yes, you absolutely should reward employees for the performance that they put in, and especially the output of that performance. But you also should be capable of maybe identifying what a reasonable level of contribution to performance is when you look at the variety of life situations across your team. So let me give you an example of this. I remember a time where in a performance review, a team member, I don't think it was mine, this was part of a kind of a collaborative review, where a certain team member had produced a phenomenal level of output, and they were being kind of pitted against another team member as you're looking at like the promotions and so forth. Who didn't have as much output during that same time frame. But in this particular case, it was almost like pitting a young individual who was spending 12, 13, 14 hours a day on this effort. And then you had them up against someone who was spending, let's say, 8 hours a day, and they had to then shut off because they were a mother and take care of other responsibilities. And so there's no doubt that someone's going to produce more output if they're putting in 12, 13, 14-hour days compared to the 8-hour day, right? And so I think an experienced manager can find a way to both reward the performance from that 12, 13, 14-hour individual, but also make sure that it doesn't then create an unnecessary exclusion for that other individual to feel pressured that they have to be working that much time to be able to stack up against their peers.
It's like my immediate instinct is like, why is that person working 12 or 13 or 14 hours? Like that's not healthy. Go get a hobby.
Right.
And that's the thing. There's like a deprogramming when you're in the young person's season of life, starry-eyed, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, go grab life by the horns, go in and get it. You're learning new skills. You're achieving mastery. There's a lot of just positioning of like, that's where you are whenever you're getting started. You want to prove yourself, all of that good stuff. Those aren't necessarily like bad things. I think what is bad is exploiting that. And that is something that I've seen time and time again. Many industries, like my wife, she started out in the film industry, which is just like notorious for that. Force everyone to do it, and they're all, young and hungry and are willing to put up with a lot of crap in order to get through to the other side. And then eventually you join the union and it slows down like a little bit, like not really. So it's like there's just like a health and a pace that it absolutely is leadership's job to model that, to prioritize that. And not just from like a level playing field thing, which also matters, but just again, that longer term sustainability.
Yeah. The health of your team, this machine.
Yeah. but also writ large, right? Like society, like writ large. It's like when, you've got your 5 kids, they're all doing activity. There's a limit to the amount of those activities that they could do. And like, I don't know, can you like speak to like how you make, because there's literally a limit to time and space. Your 5 sons each wanted to sign up for 3 different activities, right? And you just do that math and you look at how many hours there are in the day and what your resources are and all of that stuff. Like, it can't happen, right? Like it's impossible. I'm not quite there yet. My daughter's almost 7 and I only have 1 kid. So it's like, we'll be fine. But I see a lot of people in my life who are totally redlining. It is the like life equivalent of that working 12, 13, 14 hours a day with no reprieve.
Oh gosh, Brad, where could I go with this? Maybe people are expecting to hear Cameron, the design leader here, but maybe I need to speak as Cameron, the father.
Yeah, you gotta speak as the person. Yeah.
Magically, life has found a way over the years, with the kids that we've had, and again, having them early on helped me, I think, understand that you can still find a way to prioritize family amongst all of your demanding roles. I mean, there were times with my 4th son, I was my 3rd or 4th son, I don't remember. I was literally on my laptop in the hospital, no less than maybe 12 hours after they'd been born, right? Trying to catch up on things and crank out things. And unfortunately, that's the way that life is sometimes. And I don't recommend that, of course, but that's the reality of what happens sometimes. I get that. I understand it. Over the years that we've had kids, it's always been a question of like, how are we going to afford another kid? How are we going to have time for another kid? Are we going to have to buy a bigger car for now? There's all these things as more kids come, and yet magically it works out. I think when we care deeply about things in our life, be it work or family or anything else, we make time for those things, and we suddenly start with maybe consciously and unconsciously deprioritize other stuff that we thought it mattered, but it just doesn't matter as much. I think the one thing I've done right throughout my career as it pertains to like creating this balance and making sure I do have time for my family is, I put in a good solid work day, but that's it. I mean, I might try to treat you with, kindness and even love, but we're not family. So I'm going to spend 8 hours with you and that's what you get from me. And then I go home to my other things. I'm not going to go hang out with you after work and do those sorts of things. That's just kind of who I am. But that forcing function of having kids has created that cutoff to be able to then go spend time. But like to your point earlier, you could say I'm putting in 16, 18-hour days when you calculate having work and then having kids on top of it, right? I mean, it's a lot of stuff that we all have to do, but it magically works out. And we were chatting before we started recording that, there was a time where 4 of our sons were playing competitive soccer. And we had on a Saturday, they were on 3 different teams. We had to find ways to get to their tournaments, sometimes in 3 different cities. And it was just absolute madness. And yet I look back at that period with such great fondness. And I'm so happy we did that. We focused on what really mattered the most at the time. But as crazy as it was, we had a ton of fun doing it. It was just a wonderful period of our life. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just rambling, maybe not providing anything of value to
No. There's so much there. Like, well, one, the attitude matters. And this is the thing kind of like to counter how you're saying it. And I'm sure experientially, when you're in the moment, you are stressed, you're racing to the next thing, or you're like, crap, am I going to get there before the end of the second half or whatever that might be. I'm no doubt there's stress involved in the moment. What I'm hearing from you is that it's like that real deep understanding of family is a priority. Family is everything, which is a value that I share very strongly. You're able to show up to it and understand the importance of it and understand the value of it, even if it is like stressful or you're running around, but you have that sense of gratitude and understanding. That's a lot different. And I'm not suggesting that the other people I see in my life who are redlining and they seem miserable, frankly. They're being pulled away from being able to appreciate the moment. Yeah. And I really want that. in life, in work, in everything. To be able to like have that presence and that gratitude and that appreciation and that intentionality is like what I want for everyone to experience. And it's there. All you need to do is shift the focus or shift your perspective on it.
I love that you're bringing this up because related to what we talked about earlier, authenticity and how important that is to me, I think it's important to let people know here that I don't have it all figured out and that
Yeah.
we still have challenges as a family, I think, where we do feel burned out and that we're running from one thing to the next. I do think it is a casualty that life just seems to get more busy. And I think there is some degree of technology that has amplified that. Anyone can contact me at any time now because of this magical rectangle that I carry around in my pocket. Didn't used to be the case. Certainly wasn't the case when we first had children. And now it creates different dynamics that can make life feel very stressful. And so while I strive for that balance between work and family and everything else, the reality is that, man, life can be so demanding sometimes, and trying to put all the pieces together, it is hard. And so I think when I speak to the balance, for me, that's longer term. Like in the short term, there are weeks where I'm like everyone else and I'm just like, I don't know how I stay on top of everything and it feels very stressful. But longer term, I know what I'm striving towards. I know that there are going to be some bad weeks and all of that, some bad days. But if I kind of keep my eyes on the prize, so to speak, of where I'm trying to go with my career and with my children and my relationship with my wife, then I trust that I'm going to get there. And I'm far enough into my life now that I've seen that model works.
That's beautiful. What I'm hearing you say is taking the time to dig deep, play that game of like, what am I doing here? Where am I going? What's my value system? Really taking the time to do that can help in those moments. Yeah, we're all humans and we all experience stress. We all get whatever things stacked on top of each other. And sometimes the cards just fall in a really awkward way. And you got to figure out how to make it all work. And it's gross. Like you're saying, that you could always fall back on, or that this is a node in time. Again, there's like a real groundedness. And I think that you've just done such a great job over the years of like modeling that groundedness. To invoke one of my favorite things of yours was like you created a phone contract whenever your kid came up. It's like, that's one of those other things that's like, I don't know what this is, so I'm going to put this contract together. We're going to do this. I'm going to share this. We're going to figure it out. But it's like, it's kind of coming from this place of, it's like, let's be like really intentional about this. Let's put these right like foundations and structures in place so that we're not just winging it. Like, I'm not just like throwing this, like you said, this magical rectangle that's also a total Pandora's box. Just like chucking that at a young mind and saying, all right, knock yourself out. For as long as I've known you, I just like feed that like real foundation level stuff really kind of shine through. And I love that about you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. It's been so rewarding to have 4 of our 5 sons now be adults and to see who they've become. And it really puts into perspective that, if this week is terrible, and maybe your son slammed, the door in your face because they were super upset with you, over the long term, they turn out to be quite good individuals. And
yeah,
it's been so rewarding to see that despite my mistakes as a father, despite maybe not giving them enough time, because there were weeks where I was working 12, 14 hours, whatever, they still turned out to be phenomenal individuals. And I think the same applies to the teams that we work with and the teams that we lead as managers, that sometimes we get caught up in the quarter to quarter and what we're really doing. And we may not recognize that we're impacting a human being.
Yeah.
And 20 years from now, that human being is going to be appreciative of what you did, or they might regret and be, scornful of what you did. And so we have that incredible privilege and opportunity to just try our best. And we're going to get some things wrong, but to try our best to help these human beings produce great work while recognizing that they're also human beings.
And I think that's really well said. And just like showing up and recognizing the humanity of everyone that we encounter in life is seems to just go a really long way and just yield healthier outcomes than the alternative.
It's worth pointing out for those that are younger listening to this that there is value and sometimes necessity in putting in longer hours early in your career to be able to try to get ahead. I remember that even though we had kids, there were still days that I'd work a long day or I'd come home and do some freelance work. And bless her heart, my sweet wife, Suzanne, would be the one putting the kids down or changing their diapers. And some days I feel horrible about that. But we had an agreement that, my role was to provide for the family and her role was to be a full-time mother for the most part. And so we did our best. And I hope nobody listening to this thinks Cameron never changed a diaper. I certainly did as much as I possibly could back then. But the point being is even then, even though I had kids, I was still working long days to try to get ahead of my career. And it did pay off in a lot of respects. And so I hope if you are younger in your career that you're not hearing Cameron say, don't work long days. There may be times that you need to do that, especially early in your career where you need to get ahead. And that's okay. You just figure out what works for you. But I think what you and I, Brad, are talking about here is just making sure that you understand there's a longer term in this. And what is that longer term going to look like for you? And what are you working towards in the longer term to make that happen?
That's really well said. One of the other people we talked to on the show is our friend Aaron Walter. And he was the first person I think that I ever heard use the phrase seasons of life. And man, I've internalized that just like through and through, where it's just like, oh, there is a season of life where you're just getting started, trying to earn your keep. We've already talked about it. It's like your position, you're hungry, you don't have the skills, but you're eager to learn them. You're doing all that stuff, but there's also a season. In your case, that happened concurrently, where you're like, oh, I have a family to support, and that like changes how you operate, right? And there's these different seasons of life. You're experiencing it now. Your kids are one by one exiting the nest and out into the world, right? Like, so those moments in time change who we are, what our priorities are, how we show up, how we spend our time and what we need to value. And for me, that's really helped frame a lot of this stuff because I wasn't wrong also as a young 20 something working 12-hour days. Like I don't look back on that as like, oh, that was just a huge mistake. I think it's a natural season of life for a lot of like younger people. The bigger thing that's the message I hope they take away is what you were saying, which it's like that intentionality of it. And also kind of coming back to this idea of exploitation, spend the time, even if you are that young person who's like burning the midnight oil on behalf of some company, that's your first job or your second job or whatever it might be. That's okay, but just be aware in understanding what you're doing. And you can be intentional. Yes, you're grinding on this, you're doing this work on behalf of this other company that could drop you like a bad habit if things go south and all of that stuff.
Yeah, you said that beautifully. I mean, there is some element of defensibility here that we have if a company can take as much as they might want from us if we're not careful. Not all companies do that, of course, but there is that element. And then I think there's an element, you said it beautifully as well, that, sometimes I think let's take designers, we think that if I just spend more time in Figma, I'm going to be a better designer. Well, the reality is actually, if you spend some time outside of work, exercising and reading and doing hobbies, athletics, whatever, guess what? All of those things are part of that calculus to become a better designer, a better working human. And so if it's not family, there are other things that matter in your life and you should not be ashamed to make time for those things. And you should prioritize those things because you are going to be a better designer, a better whatever your trade is by being more balanced than you would be otherwise.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I would love for you to speak to how you've accomplished that because you not only are operating in the digital world, obviously you spend a lot of time, your dad, your digital leader, all that good stuff. But you also make a bunch of stuff and do a bunch of other things and make physical art and physical products and things like that. Can you talk about like those activities help shape just everything? How do you see those different dimensions to your design creative self? How does that shape your life?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing these letterpress posters for a very long time, right? Where I reimagine buildings and bridges as if they were designed by letters and numbers and so forth. Most recently, I put out into the world these duets. This is, the form that I've used, the method I've used for a very long time now. You've got some there, and I've got some on my desk too. It's great. I don't know. When I think about why do I do those things, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that we're makers. And for a very long time, as long as I can remember, I've been making stuff with my hands. And some people ask me, how did you get into the industry? And I'll tell them I didn't take any design in high school and college, you name it. It was none of that. I graduated with a degree in business management. But what I did do growing up is I was constantly working on my go-kart. I was woodworking. I flew a lot of model airplanes growing up. And so I was constantly building those and repairing those and so forth. And so using my hands to synthesize ideas, playing drums like playing music for a very long time. I think since 5th grade is when I started. Synthesizing beautiful outcomes with our hands has been important to me throughout my entire life and continues to be important to me. So I don't know if I could say I do those posters and duets now and these other physical goods because I believe they're going to lead to me becoming a very financially adept person through these activities. It's like, I don't know. I just love making stuff. And for me, this is another way to scratch that itch of making stuff. And if other people can appreciate it, man, that makes it feel even more rewarding. But even if they don't, I don't care. I've got stuff in my house that only we as a family see and I'm super proud of. And so if nobody appreciates my posters or duets, I'm okay with that. I feel good that I've expressed that, this carnal desire to create or whatever you want to call it.
I love that. And I think that's so important for other people to hear. I find this thing that tends to happen is that people, myself included, and I'm susceptible to it. It's like, oh, well, I'd love to make art, but I'm not an artist. Or I'd love to make music, but I'm not a musician. I told myself that for a long time for both art and music because of a preconceived notion of what an artist or musician does. We find ways to talk ourselves out of things because it's like, well, that's not my main thing. Oh, I'm just a UX designer, or I'm just an accountant. I couldn't possibly, I'm interested in this thing. I like this idea of letterpress or go-kart building or whatever that thing is. There seems to be this kind of multifaceted dynamic in play, which is the internet has made things so much more accessible to people, which on one hand is absolutely amazing because you can get started with these things. On the other hand, we're all sort of exposed to people who are experts at woodworking, at whatever that thing is. And it's like, that could be intimidating. And it could be a non-starter for a lot of people. And especially whenever it doesn't fit squarely into, here's my family circle and that one's pretty obvious. Here's my work circle. Here's what's pretty obvious. Then there's these things that are just kind of around and it's hard to figure out. Like, where the hell do these fit in to the bigger narrative, right? And I've struggled with that myself. But yeah, what I'm hearing you say is it almost sounds like you just let it go. You just let it go and let yourself enjoy the act of making.
I guess so. But I got to tell you, I feel guilty when I spend, if it's not work, not family, if it's not very active in roles related to my religion that keep me busy outside of work as well. So if it's not like one of those three things, I feel guilty. Dude, I was like, should I be spending time on this poster? Or should I be, sitting down to play drums or whatever? Because there's other things I need to be doing. But I think it's the act of forcing ourselves to make time for those things that we might feel guilty about that actually contribute to not only us being a better designer, better father, whatever, but just enjoying life more. I love the fact that you're
Mm.
posting videos all the time of you playing bass or playing drums. And I'm like envious because one, I would never be, I think, courageous enough to do that myself. But two, I'm like, this is awesome. I love that Brad, the person I know to be this remarkable, creative individual, awesome and creative, one of the best, if not arguably the best design system expert in the world. And yet he's playing drums, he's playing bass, he's throwing this event that's all about music. And I'm almost envious that you're making time for that among your busy schedule. And somehow that is important enough to you that is a priority.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. But like, I'll just say, boy, I feel it as well. What I've been trying to do has been trying to sort of structure those things and those activities, and even just like, I'm just going to sit here and noodle and record it. And like that can actually be the span of 5 minutes that I'm doing that before my guilt bells start going off and I get back to my stuff. So yeah, I feel that same pull into the thing. Here's the things I should be doing, but holy smokes, you're exactly right. It's like, these are the things that are joyous. These are the things that are free. They're not tethered to anything. I'm not making money off of this. I'm not trying to. It's just this sheer, pure act of creativity, to be able to remind ourselves of that and to have something that is this kind of pure exercise in just making something. Cool. We need to all give ourselves more permission to do that kind of stuff. There's a lot of forces in the world that are keeping us away from things that are exciting and joyous and whatever. And I see people absolutely riddled with guilt, and these magical rectangles in her pocket, like you said earlier, would like to remind us every day about the state of the world and all of this stuff. And it's something that I've been like sort of struggling with myself, but I also feel like I've kind of broken through a little bit to allow myself to have these moments of joy and creativity and all of that. Because like at the end of the day, I could show up, I could care about all of these things, I could point money and my attention and try to do what I can, but ultimately these things are beyond my control, right? And with work and life and family and all my other obligations, like, yes, that requires my time and attention, and I need to do a good job. But also, like, this stuff is there. In those moments, I'd be curious to get your take on this. Like, when you allow yourself to just show up to, a letterpress thing, or sit down behind a drum kit, or just do tinker in any capacity, guilt aside, it's like, for me, those little moments help buoy and help sort of carry me through some of the more challenging aspects of life, right? It's like having to be assaulted with the news or sort of personal stuff or business stuff or whatever. It's like there's hard stuff to deal with, and just kind of even like knowing that that's there, it's a sanctuary.
I think it's vital. I mean, it's absolutely vital to cope in some ways, to maybe process what's happening in the world, and in some cases turn off what's happening in the world, right? Just step away, be in your zone and your element, and just get lost in playing a musical instrument or designing something that's totally off the wall, whatever it might be. I think, that now that we're talking about this, I think there's some degree of, like, the letterpress posters. That's like one of the very few things in my life that I have complete control over. Even my wonderful marriage and family, it's a partnership with my dear sweet wife and work, and you go down the list, and all those things are co-relationship activities. But when it comes to those posters, it's just me and Illustrator. That's it. And I think there is some liberty, some freedom in that, where I can get lost in a world that I completely control. And so I think there is goodness for every one of us, no matter our circumstances, to have something that we feel complete control over. There is something liberating about that. And there's something, I think, you call it escape, call it whatever you want. There is some really goodness in just saying, this is my thing, and I don't care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's it. I think that's so well said. And it's like, it's self-expression, it's self-exploration. There's a lot wrapped up in that thing, whether it's, you're cooking or you're whatever that thing is. And I love how you brought it up, like being in the zone, like that's just such as like a strong signal. That's just like such like a core part of who you are. So it's like speaking that out, finding that when you have it, being able to experience that is so healthy on so many levels. But I love how you're saying that it's just like so many of our other, the rest of our conversation has been, how do we interact with others? How do we balance? How do we do all of this? Yeah. To just have something that's just yours. You don't need to bother anybody in order to do it. I feel like doing this. I'm going to do it. I did it. Holy smokes. What an empowering thing.
Yeah. And for those that suffer from depression and anxiety, this is a very important outlet where you can feel in complete control. You can be free of criticism from others and just live in that space for whatever period of time that you choose to live in it.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's such great. That's fantastic. I'm really glad we went there. This is great. This is exactly the conversation I was wanting to have with you. So thank you.
Man, this has been great, Brad. It's so good to have you drill me with these questions that have caused me to kind of contemplate, why I am who I am. But the fact that we've connected over some things that I hope will resonate with people that have been listening to this, that are either at this same stage and maybe had some questions coming to, maybe they didn't know they had the questions coming into this that they had, but especially for those that might be earlier in the process of everything that we've talked about, and giving them a glimpse into maybe what they can be looking ahead to. Yeah. So I'm so glad that we've touched on what we've touched on. It is not the conversation I would have expected, but it's been absolutely the conversation that we not only should have had, but I've really enjoyed having.
Yeah, I same. Thank you. A couple things before we wrap up here. The first is, perhaps it's no surprise, but music is a big part of both of our lives. So what music should more people know about? Who have you been digging? Who have you been excited about?
This is a funny question to answer because I'm like, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed answering this question, right? If I say like Taylor Swift or something like that. I don't listen to Taylor Swift, but it's basically along those lines. I'm a very eclectic listener. And so I think things like Apple Music and Spotify have been just an absolute blessing for all of us that want to discover, very bizarre, but also popular music. And you look at the spectrum of orchestral music to choral music to country to you name it. There's most genres that I probably listen to. So here's the kind of embarrassing part. I've been listening to a lot of Zac Brown Band lately.
Oh, yeah.
I love their stuff. And there's something that just, when I listen to their music, I just feel joyful. And so amazing. Any activity, whether I'm designing or I'm out in the hot tub or you name it, I'll sometimes put that on and I just feel happy.
That's great. It's amazing. That's nothing to be embarrassed of. Here's this music that makes me feel joyful, and you might feel that too. So
that's crazy. Yeah, I would never have thought I'd be answering that, giving that as an answer on a recording like this, but there it goes. So maybe someone else will find comfort in the fact that Cameron listens to Zac Brown Band, and that's completely okay.
Well, that also comes with age. It's like we just get to be like, stop trying to be like cool. And it's like, oh, I've discovered this new, underground Polish deathcore band or something like that only 3 other people have heard. It's like, there's a reason why popular music is popular music. It hits us in a certain way. And it's like, once we allow ourselves to be open to the possibilities of, well, a lot of this music that tends to have a lot of, it's always the stuff around it or the perception of it or the culture around it that gets in the way of, like, if you were to just sit and listen, you'd be like, oh man, this is great. Like, this is great. If you just like allow yourself, it's like strip away whatever you've read, whatever you've heard other people say. Like, if you just like show up and like listen to some music, no matter if it is that choral music, orchestral music, country music, whatever, it's so cool. It took me a long time to get there, but that's a skill worth developing.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of great music out there. Is there a specific Zach Brown band album or song that is the favorite?
So I'm a sucker for Spotify's This Is Blank playlists, right? So
Yeah.
the compilations. So that's usually my go-to. They've got a lot of great tracks in there. I think they're great. And I just put that on, and I've listened to that probably way too many times. I'm surprised in my rap that didn't come up as my number one artist. I think it might have, now that I do that. I did listen to it a lot last year, and I still listen to it a lot now.
Beautiful. Well, that's great. Well, I'm probably going to end up like compiling, little like playlists of the people's stuff. So thank you for being here. Last question is like, where could people find you? Where could people find your stuff, your work, your writing, your whatever you want to promote?
Yeah. So at Cameron Moll on most social media channels, shop.cameronmoll.com for the posters and duets. Those are the best places to find me. My website, cameronmoll.com, of course. So hope to connect with some of you if we're not connected already.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is an absolute pleasure. And thank you all for listening.